What's up everyone, and welcome back to the MMA Zone. Today, let's get started with Dustin Poirier predicts Michael Chandler versus Paddy Pimblett. Since the news broke this past weekend, the MMA community is excited about this fight. Dustin Poirier decided to weigh in on who he thinks is gonna win. Dustin said this on X: "Even though he's a Chandler all day, go heavy on the money." And before we continue, make sure to leave a like on the video to help support the channel. On the topic of Paddy versus Chandler, Pimblett also reacted to the fight on his YouTube channel this morning. Here's what he thinks of the fight.
Very good news. We knew it was coming, but it was taking forever to get done. I got told about it in December, lad, full 2 months ago, 2.5 months ago, so nice for it to finally get done. I think everyone got onto that. Everyone was saying I'm fighting Chandler, apart from all these stupid Twitter pages. Sausages. I like him as a person, yeah, and a fighter, you know what I mean? He's entertaining, and he's a nice person. I remember saying a couple of, last year or something, I don't think I'll end up fighting Chandler, because, we get on. It's the UFC, lad. It's business, exactly. The fight whoever gets put in front of you, and it's a good fight for my career, so let's do this.
Paddy then went off on Ilia Topuria for vacating his featherweight title and moving up to 155.
What about hand sanitizer boy, lad? Tries to call me fat lad on interviews and that, and then can't make featherweight anymore when he's got the belt up, the little sausage.
Alex Pereira fires back at Daniel Cormier. Recently, Daniel Cormier had concerns for Alex Pereira, claiming that he isn't in training camp for his fight against Magomed Ankalaev and that he's spending too much time doing side ventures. Well, today, Alex fired back at DC on Instagram and said this: "Don't worry, Daniel Cormier, we're over here working," with a clip of him training. Jon Jones versus Tom Aspinall will happen in June. With the end of February fast approaching, there's still no word on if and when Jon Jones and Tom Aspinall will fight. But veteran combat sports reporter Kevin Ilia believes that the all-star matchup could go down during International Fight Week. For months now, many fans have been praying for the day when the UFC announces Jones versus Aspinall is a go. One considerable problem was, and/or is, that Jon Jones has repeatedly said he's not interested in fighting Aspinall. Following Jones' win over Stipe Miocic in November, however, he acknowledged that if the UFC forks over heaps of cash to make the fight a reality, he'll sign on. So White has repeatedly insisted since then that the UFC will get the fight done. Case in point, during a recent Instagram live session, White told a skeptical fan that the promotion will indeed get Jones versus Aspinall finalized.
"We're not getting Jon versus Tom ever." "Yes, you will. It's coming. Relax."
In a follow-up video Ilia posted, he opined that the highly anticipated matchup could take place at International Fight Week in June.
But he said again tonight he expects Jones versus Aspinall to happen sometime later this year. Now, depending on when that fight happens, we don't know yet. My guess, and this is just a guess, I think that's going to headline International Fight Week. So I think we will see that in Las Vegas on June, whatever the date in the last week of June. I think we will see Aspinall versus Jones. That is my suspicion, my belief right now. That's kind of how things are working, and I think that's when we'll see those two guys in the ring.
So the waiting game continues, but if the bout does take place, International Fight Week does seem like a logical time for it to happen. Historically, the UFC has held massive fights during that time, and by that juncture, it'll be over 7 months since Jones last fought. But what do you think? Are you optimistic that we will finally see Jones and Aspinall throw down? Daniel Cormier surprised with Ilia Topuria's move to 155. Although Ilia Topuria repeatedly talked about moving up to 155 to hunt that division's title, Daniel Cormier recently explained why he's surprised El Matador is making the jump. Just a few days ago, Dana White announced Topuria was vacating the featherweight crown and that he's moving to lightweight. The UFC CEO said that Topuria has decided to do so since he thinks he's cleaned out the division and because he has trouble making 145 pounds. Well, since then, Cormier and Chael Sonnen weighed in on the news during their Good Guy Bad Guy show. Here's some of what DC had to say. "He's a champion through and through, but when I see him, he's not a big guy. I don't feel like he's a big guy. So to hear he says he can't make 145 anymore, to me, seems a bit odd. Because I see the UFC lightweight champion Islam Makhachev in the gym, I saw Khabib Nurmagomedov as a champ. Hell, I see Michael Chandler, and dude Charles Oliveira is massive. These guys are bigger, much bigger than Ilia Topuria. Do you buy that he just can't make the weight anymore? Or is it, I just don't want to fight the scale at that level?" This is interesting from Cormier for sure. Although he's not the first person to flag that Topuria doesn't seem to be a huge featherweight, Cormier is on point as far as the fact that Topuria could end up facing much bigger men than him at 155. But perhaps that's one of the reasons El Matador wants to make a run at lightweight, to prove his doubters wrong and potentially secure his name as an all-time great by winning another division's title. But what do you think of Cormier's take here? And do you think that Topuria will have a tough time hanging with the larger lightweights of the division? UFC updates. Okay, let's take a look at some recent news related to UFC fights and cards. MMA Junkie's Nolan King is reporting that the UFC has submitted a request to Nevada officials to hold a card at the Apex facility on May 31st. Currently, the UFC's only official card announced for May is UFC 315, which is going down on May 10th in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. So it's not surprising to hear that another UFC Vegas card is in the works for that month. After all, there seems to be a UFC Vegas card every second week. Speaking of UFC 315, recently the promotion confirmed that Mike Mallet will throw hands with Charles Radke at the event. Canada's Mallet is coming off a decision victory over Trevin Giles in November, after being stopped by longtime welterweight contender Neil Magny last January. Mallet is 4-1 in his last 5. Meanwhile, Radke from the US stopped Matthew Semmelsberger in his last outing in November, which snapped a 2-fight losing streak. Marcel Dorff recently reported via X that Tresean Gore will fight Marco Tulio in a middleweight showdown at the April 12th UFC 314 card. Gore submitted Antonio Tricoli in his last fight, which went down in November, and the tough veteran has gone 3-2 in his last 5. Meanwhile, Tulio is coming off a successful octagon debut as he stopped Ihor Portieria last month. Tulio made his way to the UFC by taking out Matteo Duclos in the last season of Dana White's Contender Series. And it's being reported that Joaquin Silva has withdrawn from a March 29th fight with Rafa Garcia, and that the latter will now battle Vince Pichel. The UFC is holding a card in Mexico City on that date. Garcia is looking to get back on track after being stopped by Grant Dawson in October. Before that, the lightweight was on a 2-fight winning streak. Pichel has not competed since May of 2024, when he lost via decision to Ismail Bonfim. The veteran fighter has fought just twice now since 2021. Israel Adesanya fires back at the MMA community for washed comments. Now that Israel Adesanya has lost 3 straight fights and is in his mid-30s, some folks believe that the last stylebender is washed. Well, recently, the former middleweight champ fired back at his critics and then some. Adesanya isn't far removed from the stoppage loss he suffered against Nasruddin Imavov last month, which, it's fair to say, sent a bit of a shockwave throughout MMA. Heading into the bout, most folks understood Imavov was dangerous and that he had a lot of momentum going in, but the consensus was Adesanya would return to the win column. On account of the defeat though, there's been talk that Izzy's days as a champion and a contender are gone. So during a recent video on his YouTube channel, the star was asked to respond to fans who claim that he's washed.
They call me washed, but how you gonna call me washed when you haven't even been in laundry? Like, you haven't even gotten dirty. What have you done? Ooh, that's bars. I like that. They call me washed, but they ain't even been in the laundry. They ain't even got dirty. Oh, I like that. I'm gonna keep that. That's a good one. That's a good one. Yeah, that's a good one.
Even if you're not a big Adesanya fan, you gotta admit that's a pretty sweet comeback. And further, while it remains to be seen if Izzy records another highlight reel or pivotal win, it is worth noting that his other recent losses came against the champ and former champs in Sean Strickland and Dricus du Plessis. So to conclude that he's washed at this juncture seems like a bit of a stretch. But what do you think? Leon Edwards gets warned ahead of his next fight. Leon Edwards is a former welterweight champ and currently holds the #1 contender spot in the UFC's welterweight division. But Michael Bisping believes what's unfolded recently for Rocky's next fight could end up being a nightmare for the renowned fighter. Edwards was originally scheduled to fight Jack Della Maddalena at the UFC's upcoming March 22nd card in London, England. But on account of an injury to Shavkat Rakhmonov, JDM has been tapped to fight the current champion Belal Muhammad at UFC 315 this coming May. As a result, Sean Brady has been moved into the scrap with Edwards. Well, more recently, Bisping discussed the change via a video on his YouTube channel. The way the former middleweight champion sees it, the turn of events could turn out to be a very, very bad thing for Edwards. This is kind of a nightmare situation for Leon Edwards. I'm not saying Leon can't beat him, but stylistically and on short notice, this is a very, very different fight and potentially a harder fight than JDM. Styles make fights. Leon is a sniper on the feet. Of course, he's got great takedown defense. He was able to take down Kamaru Usman, fully mounted him, and all the rest of it. We know he's well-rounded, but when you're training for Jack Della Maddalena and you're focusing on boxing, pretty much a stand-up affair, when you're really not working on the takedown defense and defending chokes and all the variety of madness in the jiu-jitsu world that Sean Brady does offer, it's a big mix-up. It's hard to disagree with anything that Bisping noted here. JDM is much more of a striker, while Brady is widely known to be more of a grappling specialist. So while Edwards has showcased strong wrestling defense in many of his fights, he was out-wrestled and out-grappled by Muhammad in his last outing. But what do you think? Is Edwards facing an uphill battle now that he's facing Brady at UFC London? The UFC is removing double champions? The MMA world is still buzzing from the recent news that Ilia Topuria has vacated the UFC's featherweight title and is moving up to lightweight. But now, Diego Lopez is reporting that even if Topuria had wanted to remain featherweight champ while pursuing a scrap with Islam Makhachev, the UFC would have made him vacate the belt. And before we continue, we have a favor to ask. Help us reach 200,000 subscribers on MMA Zone by subscribing and turning on notifications for daily MMA content. Seriously, we rarely miss a day. For months, Topuria has talked about his desire to move up to lightweight and challenge for that division's title. So when Dana White announced that Topuria is dropping the belt because he doesn't want to make 145 anymore, it was big news, but it wasn't necessarily shocking. Well, as you likely know, due to Topuria's decision, now Lopez will battle Alexander Volkanovski for the vacant belt at UFC 314. In a follow-up interview Lopez did with ESPN, however, the Brazilian reported champions have been told that if they want to change divisions to hunt another belt, they'll need to drop the title they hold. They were very clear to us that they said they're no longer giving a chance to jump from one weight class to another. If you want to move up, you have to vacate your title. This is what the UFC has said to all the champions who are planning to move up a weight class. They will no longer have the status of double champions simultaneously. So if what Lopez is saying is accurate, then it certainly looks like the champ era has come to a close. If you're an old school fan, you'll remember that initially, White wasn't in favor of having a fighter hold more than one belt. When Conor McGregor won the lightweight title in 2016, he was forced to vacate the featherweight belt. But eventually, White and the UFC brass changed their minds on that policy. Legends like Daniel Cormier, Amanda Nunes, and Henry Cejudo went on to win and hold belts in 2 divisions. Further, this change could also impact the decisions of current champions who have talked about challenging for a title in another division. Will Makhachev still want to do so if he has to vacate the lightweight title? Or will Dricus du Plessis still look at moving to light heavyweight? What do you think of this policy change? If it is indeed the UFC's new rule,